GEM International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. GEM International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Jordan Bateman, VC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Welcome back to the show, Jordan.
Thanks for having me again, Jim.
One of the controversies for Vancouver was during their 6-week snow and ice. I wouldn't call it crisis, but it wasn't nice. The mayor was out of town, and now one of the city councilors, an opposition member, has suggested that Vancouverites should get some kind of a refund for not getting their garbage picked up and not having their ice strewn streets cleared up. Should they get a rebate, or is it possible?
Well, I think people who went without garbage and recycling collection for several weeks, and there were some parts of Vancouver that, for up to 6 weeks did not have garbage or recycling collection. I do think those neighbors have a pretty reasonable argument for some kind of refund. On the road clearing side, a little bit tougher to do that because it's such an extensive network. You'd be refunding every single person, and how do you calculate all of that? And if someone was out of town, and that would be a little bit more difficult. But for the specific kind of garbage and recycling service, it's like anywhere. If you don't get what you paid for, you usually get a refund, and it would probably be a good faith gesture from the city government to those who are hardest hit.
Yes, and when you start to have a smelly problem build up, although, of course, the good thing about ice and snow is there's little smell.
Yeah, well, it's dangerous, though, right? So
yes.
If you put things in your back lanes, you have all this garbage and recycling there, and people are running into it, and then you added snow, and most people are clearing their driveways or laneways and piling it near that, and the city is in a contractual relationship with its taxpayers, saying they will pick up the garbage and recycling, X number of times a year, and they fell down on that. So, yeah, I could see people who went for a long period of time without that collection wanting some of that money back and wouldn't have a problem if the city refunded it.
And doesn't Vancouver annually have some of the highest municipal tax hikes in Canada?
Oh, yeah, Vancouver's never been a tax increase they don't love, especially Gregor Robertson. 3.5% wasn't enough this year. He had to add another 0.5% to deal with the fentanyl crisis. They are always increasing regulations, which again increase kind of the homeowners' cost to live in the city. So there's always these issues, and certainly Vancouver could show some good faith by holding the line on their spending and giving people a little bit back.
What about the mayor's stand that he's against natural gas? Yeah,
this one is still percolating out there, and funnily enough, Vancouver Island is up in arms over their hydroelectricity costs right now because until kind of the mid-90s, there was no natural gas on Vancouver Island. So many, many thousands more homes are heated by electricity there than here. With the cold that happened in January, people are starting to get their bills, and they're through the roof. That is a prophecy of what will happen in Vancouver if Gregor Robertson's natural gas ban is allowed to stand. People live in these condos and apartments and houses and businesses, and all of that will end up paying far more in their energy costs because electricity is more expensive than natural gas and is expected to be more expensive than natural gas for decades to come. We have a glut of natural gas in British Columbia. We have more than 2 centuries worth of supply available to us thanks to the new technology to extract it. Natural gas market around the world is staying very low. This is a great fuel source that's relatively clean burning and, most importantly, cheap. But, Gregor Robertson knows better, so he's going to put us all on expensive electricity or expensive methane, and, end up costing his taxpayers hundreds of dollars more a year in energy costs.
You were mentioning there's a court battle involving TransLink that's costing us a lot of money, but we don't know how much. Can you maybe explain?
Yeah, this might be one of the most boneheaded things TransLink has done lately. So there was a young woman named Ina Daniluk, and she is a student at Langara College. And 3.5 years ago, she wakes up, realizes that she's late for class, races out of the house, kisses her boyfriend goodbye, grabs her transit pass from the shelf, and races to the bus. She ends up getting picked up on SkyTrain by a transit police officer who asks to see her fare. She shows him the card, and he checks the signature on the back. It does not match her name. Turns out she's grabbed her boyfriend's transit pass instead of her own. Now, these things are identical. The only difference in them is a small signature on the back corner, on the back side of it. So she says, "Look, I'm sorry. I grabbed his instead of mine. Can I present mine to you later?" The officer says, "Absolutely not. You're evading the fare." She says, "Look, I'm a Langara College student. Every Langara College student, as part of their student fees, has to buy a transit pass from TransLink. You have no choice in the matter. You must buy it. It's part of the deal negotiated between the college and TransLink." She's like, "Look, I can prove I'm a Langara College student. Can you let me off the hook on this, or can I present my card later?" No, he gives her a $173 fine. So she, goes to the reviewer, the person, kind of the superior, and he says, "No, you have to pay the $173. She goes to a TransLink arbitrator. They force her to pay the $173. So she took them to small claims court, provincial court, and she won. And she won this scathing judgment against TransLink, where the judge just rips them to pieces. The judge actually at one point says, TransLink is, wasting public money and the court's time with nonsense like this. But TransLink, not satisfied, appealed it to the provincial Supreme Court of BC, and then eventually won in that court. And this young woman had to pay her $173 fine. So that came down in December, the final decision. And we filed a Freedom of Information request to find out how much TransLink had spent on legal fees during this 3.5-year odyssey through the courts. And TransLink, the day after, announcing that they were going to be so accountable by having a brand new accountability center website and doing a song and dance about transparency to the media, they had turned us down. We'd refused to disclose how much they spent on this, citing solicitor-client privilege. Naturally, we didn't accept that reasoning and pointed out that governments often tell how much they spent in court cases when they're done, and we're calling on TransLink to do that here.
So they haven't disclosed their legal costs yet?
They have not disclosed their legal costs. They've outright refused. We think it's probably in the tens of thousands of dollars, in all to try to grind this kid down for $173. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to them. It's pretty clear that them holding back this information has nothing to do with solicitor-client privilege, because of course, who cares how much they spent as far as hurting their future chances in court. This is just about trying to keep the public in the dark about how they wasted our money.
Well, several years ago, I asked the city of Vancouver, how much do you spend every year defending police officers accused of wrongdoing? And they wouldn't disclose that, but apparently Maclean's magazine had found out, and it's $3 to $5 million a year. And I said, well, for $3 to $5 million a year, you could buy a lot of $5,000 body cams for police officers.
Yeah, legal fees are a huge expense for municipalities, for government agencies. Some civic governments actually hire in-house lawyers to try to help defray the cost, which gives you a sense of just how much they're spending. Others do a mix. Some have straight contracting out. For us, look, we just want to know, right? Like, ultimately, the taxpayers paid the money to prosecute this young woman. And we think it matters, right? Like, if they spent $500 to prosecute this young woman and got the $173 fine, that really does change the conversation a lot than if they spent $50,000. And we'd like to know. 10 days ago, the BC government, was asked, how much did you spend on your 15-year court battle with the with the BC Teachers Federation? The government said, give us a few hours, came back with the information. It cost $2.6 million. They could have hidden behind solicitor-client privilege and said, no, we can't tell you, But they said, no, this is the public's right to know. And even though that obviously isn't great for, the Christy Clarks and Mike Berniers of the world to have that number out there, they felt it was important to come forward and come clean with taxpayers on the costs. So we're encouraging TransLink to do the same, and we put out a press release today, and we're hoping that, the media is pestering TransLink today and demanding to know how much was spent on prosecuting this Langara student.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after the break.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman. Jordan, following Brexit and the election of Donald Trump, are people getting wise to political spin, and could this affect the upcoming BC election?
Yeah, isn't that the million-dollar question, huh? Look, I think there is no secret that there is a wave of anti-elitism going on around the world. And I think it actually, one of the first places we actually saw it surface was during the HST referendum, what was it now, 6 years ago, when the rank and file, average British Columbian, everyday British Columbian, signed petitions and voted down a tax that, all the economists and all the eggheads and all the politicians said was the best thing to do for the economy. And people said, no, I know my pocketbook better than, Joe economist at SFU. I think that was actually the first nibble of it we saw. We saw the same thing. We saw a real pushback against the elites in the TransLink referendum, which, the Taxpayers Federation led the winning side. We were up against 200 different groups, virtually every, politician, all the fancy executive directors, all the latte sipping CEOs. We were up against them, and the people said, no, we know what's better. We know what's best for our pocketbook. We know better than these so-called experts. And then you saw it with Brexit. You saw it in Alberta when the Notley government toppled the long-standing PC government. You saw it when Trudeau won. I mean, the post-media papers endorsed Harper. But the people spoke and said, no, they know better. And you certainly saw it in the Trump election. So there is this wave going on. I think it scares the BC Liberals to death. I think that's why they're so quick right now to stamp out any possible election issue. Try to get on the right side of all these different issues and try to push them at least past May. At the same time, I don't sense the NDP have captured any kind of populist feel yet. And the NDP are on the wrong side of the jobs issue if they're trying to capture that populist spirit. So, yeah, I've been telling my friends, like in an election about nothing, which is what this feels like, anything can become an issue. And we're waiting to see, what is the issue, what will galvanize people to come to the polls.
The BC Liberals are currently spending advertising dollars to promote so-called good things that they're doing. Does that actually help to get votes? I mean, it seems to me every second ad on television is promoting their $37,500 mortgage helper.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a PVR guy now, so I hardly ever see these things, except during Canuck games. I know, so there's a lot on during that. Yes, elections, political parties will always do what worked before. And you got to remember, 4 years ago, Christy Clark was down 20 points in the polls. And, the miracle Lazarus-like resurrection of the party, the comeback kid. And they're going to go back to that playbook. They're going to do the TV ads. They did it last time. They're doing them this time. They're going to do a lot of those same things they did last time because it worked. Similarly, the NDP are kind of fighting this election based on the last election's turf. We're going to be tougher on Christy. We're going to prosecute her record. Last time it was more about some of the BC Rail stuff. This time it's more about pay to play. Really trying to hang everything on Christie's personal brand or lack thereof. So My advice to these political parties would be, yeah, that's great. Your tactics, certainly, are shaped by your last election, but, Wayne Gretzky used to skate to where the puck was going to be, not where it was. And the political party that figures out and gets a little ahead of the play here, figures out where the public is going, is probably the one that's going to win.
How much do you think these ads are costing us?
Well, Bob Mackin's done a lot of work on this. I think it's in the tens of millions of dollars. It's hard to get a concrete number because there's so many for so many different plans. And so you've got to dig through all these different budgets. But, conservatively, I would say probably $50 million when all is said and done. And that would be about twice what they spent last time. And they're going to keep running these things right up to, the minute before the writ drops. In April, and expect another wave. I mean, they've got a provincial budget coming out mid-February. I've just booked my hotel to go over there and be in the budget lockup. You can bet that there'll be a whole other round of ads, touting whatever it is that's in that budget that they want to sell to the public.
What's your opinion on medical services premiums in BC? I think we're perhaps the only province now that charges directly for healthcare, not related to your income level unless you're collecting welfare. And should BC take part in a province-wide prescription drug buy program? Yeah,
it's time for BC to get rid of the medical services premium. I do think that will be the centerpiece announcement in their budget. I have no inside information on that, but looking at how they're trying so hard to diffuse potential electoral bombs, this is one that's still, the fuse is still lit. The Greens and the NDP have each come up with plans to essentially get rid of the MSP system. I think the Liberals want to do something and then want to use it to tout their record on tax cuts. So I'm hopeful the Liberals announce a 2 or 3 year phase out of MSP, not just rolling it into income tax, but actually finding a way to cut people's taxes, leave a little bit more money in their pocket instead. So we'll wait and see. Of course, I said this last year as well before the budget got into the budget lockup, and the government just did cosmetic changes that really did not address the underlying issue of MSP. So hopefully they've learned from the negative press they got last time and are willing to present something better to the public this election.
Going back to the taxpayer-bought government ads, do they actually help get votes?
Well, I don't think they hurt. I mean, I think the people who are most upset about this are probably people who aren't going to vote Liberal anyways. But if you see a program, you see ads for a program that you think is going to help people, I think if you don't sit and give a lot of thought or study to the first-time home buyers program, for example, your reflex is to say, hey, that's a great policy. I mean, who wouldn't want to help kids get into homes? It's only when you sit down and start to think, wait a minute, it does increase demand for the lower end homes. It's going to price other people out of the market. It is a lot of risk for government to take on. You're saddling these kids with another mortgage. Is that right? It's only when you really kind of dig into it that you start to see that it's not the greatest policy in the world and it's failed elsewhere. So, but it does make a great shiny 3-second ad on TV, and I think that's what the Liberals are counting on.
In the U.S., Trump is eliminating a lot of onerous government regulations. Will Canada and BC need to do the same to remain competitive?
Well, Trump could actually learn a lot from British Columbia from that 2001 to 2005 term, where they did manage to reduce a ton of regulation here. Lots of places talk about cutting regulations. Very few actually do it. And the only way to do it is you have to have political accountability. So what the Liberals did back in 01 to 05 is they put Kevin Falcon, who was then a young whippersnapper. He was the Minister of State for Deregulation. And his first year, they went through, they counted all the regulations up. There was, I think, millions of them, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, whatever. So then they could craft a target, right? They wanted to cut regulation by a third. So they knew the number they had to cut, and they knew how many regulations each ministry had to cut. Well, 6 months after that, very little progress had been made. So Falcon went to Campbell and said, look, the ministers whine and complain, and they've got so much on their plate, they don't do anything about this. What should I do? So at the end of every cabinet meeting, they started a thing where there was a table, and each minister had to report out every week how many regulations had been cut. And guess what? If you had a 0, you had to have a pretty good reason or Premier Campbell was going to get on your case. And what would happen is these ministers would leave that cabinet meeting and go talk to their deputy ministers, who of course do the real work, and give them a little bit of grief. The boss yelled at me. What's going on? We need to cut more regulations. That political accountability ended up being the secret weapon against red tape in British Columbia. And really, since 2005, when that basically ceased, we've kind of been treading water in BC, cutting a few here and there. But the big truth is they cut more than a third of the regulations. They hit the target. Even the skeptics like Palmer and Smith and Baldry had to admit that the Liberals did the job. So, Donald Trump could learn a lot. Maybe he needs to fly Kevin Falcon and Gordon Campbell to teach him how to do it.
Of course, they probably tried to do it scientifically. Has Trump done anything to you that would indicate that he does anything scientifically?
Well, we need to remember, policies are policies, but it's how it's walked out on the ground that really counts. And, in fairness to Trump, it's such a weird system where you have hundreds of people who have to be, or thousands who have to be replaced in the political infrastructure of all these different agencies. So you have Obama-era people who, hate what Trump stands for and don't agree with the orders. So they're not going to lift a finger to actually enforce them or help them. It's a mess. Let's wait and see 6 months from now, which of these executive orders have actually, kind of entrenched themselves in American life. It'll be interesting to see what these future appointees actually execute.
Anything else, Jordan, you wanted to bring up today?
Well, just to say, we are headed for a very brief legislative session in February. The BC Liberal government will call the House back. They'll do a speech from the throne. My understanding is they'll have 2 or 3 weeks of sittings, deal with some of the pre-election legislation they want to get through. They'll do the budget, and then shortly after budget debate finishes, they'll pull the plug and we'll head into the true election campaign. So last few question periods for John Horgan to really capture the public's attention using the provincial media. And from there, it'll be off to the hustings and the Burma shaves and all those great political campaign traditions.
Are taxpayers getting their money's worth when you have a government that usually refuses to hold very many legislative sessions?
I'm always of the idea that, look, don't pass laws just for the sake of passing laws. I mean, when you're in the legislature for a purpose, to pass a law. There's some things that need to be addressed, obviously, in British Columbia. That's work that needs to be done. But look, don't just show up and invent new laws for the sake of it, because that just adds to red tape and regulation. And, you should never just be making a law because it's another box to tick. It should be done because it's actually necessary. So I'm a little bit more relaxed on that than maybe some commentators are. I also know, many of these MLAs, not all of them, but many of them do incredible work in their constituencies, do important work connecting people to provincial services, and that's work that I actually place a lot of value on. And sometimes that slows down when they're in Victoria, not in their home ridings.
Jordan, thanks a lot for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me.
My guest has been Jordan Bateman, the BC director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Their website, taxpayer.com. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show can be emailed to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.